Like to tell us a little bit about your background with regard to art and how you got involved in being a professional artist?
Well, one's still trying to be a professional artist, but I guess having come straight from college and was lucky enough to get into Elam many years ago, and I kind of thought in the early beginnings when I started my degree that if I was going to be successful in achieving it, I kind of wanted to learn something. I wanted to have some skills behind me. One of the decisions to go into print was it was something that I'd never learnt from college, and you know, I felt that though I needed to go away with some skills behind me, basically. It was the best decision I ever made. I had some absolutely fantastic tutors who not only were my tutors, but they became friends and colleagues later in life, who followed my career, and I think that now print has become the backbone of my practice. It informs every other discipline that I tend to touch, and it's become a drawing tool. So from those early beginnings, Elam was sort of a stepping stone for to have that sort of skill base. And then I went on to do a master's degree at Slade in London. That again was another challenging time where we went over to do sort of the OE as well as be a student, and so it kind of really reinforced you know, my ideas, how I was making work, seeing things from another perspective, and I guess that's how things kind of developed.
And you mentioned print as being the medium that you're closest to. What made you choose the print as a medium?
I think the process of print allows me to develop ideas in a particular way. It's a hard one, I think, in terms of the subtlety and the surfaces. The processing of ideas and the way that you develop work happens very differently to how you would drawing or painting. The application is slightly different. It suits my way of thinking. I'm very organised and ordered, and I think it kind of complements the way I am. And it's a way of putting different marks down, and it allows me to kind of layer rather than just being something very black and white. So I think it's the endless sort of possibilities that print allows me that I kind of am very attracted to, probably more so, you know, than kind of sitting down and doing some drawings. I would probably sit down and do some prints or processing some simple techniques of print to create drawings maybe initially. I mean, I say drawings because print, I kind of see it as a drawing tool. It's a starting point that will then lead me to something else that's maybe more mixed media.
Well, print is a very contemporary medium. What we see in your work is a lot of your heritage, and your background is rich in the culture and tradition that you bring into your work. Well, what is the motivation behind your work? What do you do?
Being of mixed heritage, having strong affiliations to New Zealand, having been brought up by my mother and my grandfather and my grandparents, I was really privileged to, from my grandfather's side, hear stories about our traditional heritage, and it was something that I learned at a very young age, and I think that those things handed down, those stories, those sort of ideas of a sense of place were kind of embedded very early on as a child. And as I grew older, I think I kind of always had those sort of curiosities of kind of wanting to discover more. And we're still discovering more as a family in terms of our Māori ancestry. But it was really important to kind of explore those ideas. And I think fairly my work is kind of, there is a fusion of both sides of my ancestry, and I think it appeals in terms of, I suppose what the work talks about is those relationships, that history, that sense of identity, and I suppose creating new contemporary stories where I see myself within those traditions. So I guess when I make work, I don't just have myself in mind, but I also have not just the wider New Zealand public to consider, but also just kind of sharing my story. And I think that, you know, and kind of hope that, you know, people viewing the work would have some sense of affiliation with it.
And that's what I wanted to ask you, the issues that you'd like the viewer to take away from when they look at your work.
Well, I think often when I start a new body of work, there's always ideas of printed and painted history in mind, about where we've come from to go forward. So there's quite often that sort of discussion being made. I don't know, I think it's a real hard one, you know, to sort of demand or ask a viewer to say, you've got to take this away, and this is the right story. I think, you know,
Suggestion.
Yeah, you know, people are either going to love or hate it, you know, and it's a personal thing.
It is.
I say to my students, if you demand the viewer to go up and have a really close look at the work, then I think you've made it successful work, because they've had to go closer to it to see a surface, a quality, let alone what the message is. So I think the work is really, they can take what they like, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, what artists have influenced you? Whose work do you look at closely?
It's really interesting. I mean, I've worked alongside a number of artists over the years, having had them as tutors as well as working alongside them as colleagues. People like Rodney Fumpston, who was my tutor and also a colleague, from a professional point of view, and the knowledge and skills that I gained from him have been incredibly influential, just in terms of the process and the medium. It's interesting, many years ago when I was actually at Slade, there was a number of European artists who I was looking at, and I was thinking to myself when I was driving down here today that there was actually a New York artist, male artist, who for the life of me I can't remember his name. He did these beautiful scroll drawings, and having looked back over old visual diaries, I saw his work again and I thought, oh, you know, there's some really lovely qualities about the elegance of the work that sort of came down the wall and then rolled, and they were very fluid. The mark making was very loose. It was very sort of gestural work, and I thought I can fit my traditional rāranga whakaaro patterns within that format, and I think that kind of, at those early stages when I started making this work, sort of set the format from which I wanted to work from next. I really enjoy this format. It reminds me of the tukatuka and whāriki structures, and so yeah. It really comes, I suppose I'm not really answering the question. I think my influences are more from traditional material culture rather than a specific artist. I mean, there's a number of contemporary Māori artists who I really enjoy their work, but I don't see their work influencing mine. But I like the way that they develop their own, bringing their own sort of traditional stories, and then, you know, bringing it to a contemporary stage, if you like.
And what are the challenges you face with regard to creating your work in New Zealand?
Challenges. It's an interesting one. I think when you're making a body of work and you put it out as a solo body of work, it's a no mean task. There's a lot of time and energy obviously put into then getting it to being hung in a gallery wall. I don't know, I suppose touching an audience, you know, I think when you put yourself on centre stage, you're either going to get criticism or you're going to get the opposite, you're going to get a lot of praise. So it can be quite a nerve-wracking thing. But I don't see that as a large challenge. I think we have got a fantastic art culture, and if anything, you know, we've got a very sort of what's the sort of very typical Kiwi term, you know, we roll our sleeves up and we do it, you know, and anything is achievable. So I wouldn't say that it was challenging as such. I suppose it's about meeting a market, and of course that's very challenging at the moment, but hopefully that will change.
And what excites you most about going to New York?
Well, I think it's exciting on a number of different levels. I think that we're quite often kind of benchmarking ourselves against another country, Europe, but actually the New Zealand art scene is incredibly strong, and the standard, quite frankly, stands very well up against other countries. What's exciting about it is that, you know, we'll go with a fairly strong voice, and I think the work will talk for itself, frankly.
It does. Your work certainly does. Thank you.